Julian whistled a happy tune as he strolled across the old wooden bridge. The sun was shining, and a gentle breeze played with his hair. Below him, the river sparkled like a path of diamonds, and he could see tiny fish darting in the clear water. He loved this bridge. It felt like a secret walkway over the world, taking him to quiet paths where he could think and dream. Each step on the sturdy planks made a soft, comforting thump, a rhythm to his cheerful mood. He was on his way to visit his grandmother, and he had a big smile on his face, thinking about the warm cookies she always had waiting. The air felt light and fresh, filled with the smell of green leaves and damp earth from yesterday's light rain. Julian took a deep breath, feeling so peaceful. He looked up at the sky, which was a brilliant blue, with only a few fluffy white clouds that looked like cotton balls. Nothing could spoil this perfect afternoon, he thought. But as he reached the middle of the long bridge, a strange quiet fell over everything. The birds, who had been singing joyfully, suddenly stopped. The gentle breeze turned into a strong gust, making the bridge sway just a little. Julian paused, his whistle fading. He looked up again, and his happy smile slowly disappeared. Those few fluffy white clouds had grown enormous, turning a dark, bruised purple. They rushed across the sky with surprising speed, swallowing the bright sunshine in big gulps. The sparkling river below now looked dull and gray, reflecting the sudden change in the heavens. A shiver ran down Julian's spine, not from the cooler air, but from a feeling of unease. The peaceful afternoon had vanished, replaced by a sudden, heavy silence that felt like a warning. Then, a low rumble echoed in the distance, a sound like a giant's stomach growling. It was faint at first, but quickly grew louder, closer. Julian's heart began to beat a little faster. He knew that sound. It was thunder, and the sky, which had been so blue just moments ago, was now almost completely covered by angry, swirling clouds. The edges of the clouds glowed with an eerie, yellowish light, hinting at something powerful brewing within them. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of rain, and a few large, cold drops splattered on the wooden planks around him. The bridge, which had felt like a friendly path, now seemed long and exposed, stretching endlessly under a quickly darkening sky. Julian felt a knot of worry tighten in his stomach. The first few drops of rain quickly turned into a heavy downpour, as if someone had tipped a giant bucket over the sky. Julian gasped as the cold water hit him, soaking his clothes in an instant. His light jacket was no match for the sudden deluge, clinging to his skin and making him shiver. The wind, which had been a strong gust, now howled like a hungry wolf, whipping his hair into his eyes and making it hard to see. It pushed against him, trying to make him stumble. He gripped the wooden railing of the bridge tightly, his knuckles white, feeling small and helpless against nature's fury. The rumble of thunder that had been far away now exploded right above him. Boom! The sound shook the very air, vibrating through the wooden planks of the bridge and up into Julian's bones. He jumped, a cry catching in his throat. It was so loud, so powerful, that it felt like the sky itself was tearing apart. Another booming crash followed almost immediately, making him squeeze his eyes shut for a moment. He could feel his heart thumping wildly in his chest, a frantic drumbeat of fear. The bridge, which had seemed so sturdy earlier, now felt fragile and exposed. The planks became slick with rain, making each step risky. He looked ahead, but the driving rain created a thick, watery curtain, blurring everything beyond a few feet. He couldn't see the end of the bridge, couldn't see the safe, dry land. He felt utterly alone, trapped in the middle of this roaring, watery world. The thought of being stuck here with the storm raging around him made a cold wave of panic wash over him. He tried to shout, to call out, but the wind snatched his words away, twisting them into nothing. The rain hammered down so hard that it made a deafening roar, drowning out all other sounds. It was impossible to hear anything but the storm. He imagined the river below, usually so calm, now surely a churning, angry beast. The idea made his stomach lurch. Julian pressed himself against the railing, trying to make himself as small as possible. He wished he could disappear, wished he was anywhere but here. Tears, mixed with the cold rainwater, streamed down his face. He wasn't sure if they were from the cold or from the overwhelming fear that was gripping him. Every flash of lightning, though he couldn't see the actual bolts, lit up the world in brief, terrifying bursts of white, followed by an even louder boom of thunder. He felt like a tiny toy caught in a giant's angry game. The joy he had felt just minutes ago was a distant memory, replaced by a deep, chilling dread. He was completely alone, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Julian huddled tighter against the cold, wet railing, his eyes squeezed shut against the relentless assault of rain and wind. Each booming crash of thunder made him flinch, his whole body tensing. He felt tears mix with the rainwater on his face, a cold stream that mirrored the dread in his heart. He just wanted the storm to end, wanted to be anywhere but this exposed, swaying bridge. Then, just as another deafening clap of thunder shook the air, a brilliant, blinding flash of white light tore through the dark, rainy curtain. It wasn't just a flicker. It was a powerful, wide-spreading burst that turned the entire sky into a giant camera flash. For a split second, the world was illuminated with stark clarity, almost like daylight, but colder, sharper. In that fleeting moment, before darkness and rain swallowed everything again, Julian's eyes flew open. And there, against the shockingly bright backdrop, he saw it. Not the end of the bridge, not a tree or a distant house, but a shape. A human shape. It was a person walking towards him slowly but steadily through the driving rain. The lightning had frozen them in place for that instant, a silhouette framed by the brilliant light. They were wearing a dark jacket, their heads slightly bowed against the wind, but Julian could clearly make out their form. He blinked, wondering if his fear was playing tricks on his eyes, if the storm had made him imagine things. But then, another flash, less bright this time but still strong enough, flickered across the sky. And there they were again, a little closer now. It wasn't a trick. It was real. Another person, on the bridge. With him, a strange mix of feelings rushed through Julian. Relief, so powerful it almost made his knees buckle, warred with a fresh surge of fear. Relief that he wasn't alone, that there was another living soul in this terrifying chaos. But fear, too, because who would be out in such a storm? And what if they were just as scared and helpless as he was? The figure continued to move, a dark spot against the gray, watery blur. As they got a little closer, Julian could see they were tall. He watched them, not daring to move, his breath catching in his throat. The wind howled, the rain poured, and the thunder rumbled, but Julian's eyes were fixed on the approaching person. He couldn't quite make out their face through the driving rain, but the very sight of them, another human being, was like a tiny spark of hope in the vast, dark storm. He wondered if they saw him too. He hoped they did. He hoped they weren't just passing by, but were coming to help. The figure grew clearer with each passing moment, battling against the fierce wind and rain. Julian watched, mesmerized, a tiny flicker of hope pushing through his fear. The person was tall, wrapped in a dark, waterproof coat, their head tucked low. As they drew closer, another flash of lightning, not as bright as the first, lit up the space between them. In that quick burst of light, Julian saw the person's face. It was a young man, probably a few years older than Julian, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a spark of worry. The young man saw Julian too. His eyes widened slightly as he took in Julian's trembling form, hunched against the railing, his face pale and streaked with rain and tears. He could tell Julian was scared, truly terrified. Without a second thought, the young man quickened his pace, almost running, splashing through the puddles that now covered the bridge planks. "Hey, are you okay?" the young man shouted, his voice strong but battling against the roar of the wind and rain. He had to yell to be heard, his words barely reaching Julian through the storm's din. "Don't worry. I'm here to help." Julian stared, his mouth slightly open, unable to form words. He just nodded, a small, jerky movement. The young man reached him, stopping a few feet away, his own clothes already soaked, despite his waterproof coat. Rain dripped from his hair and ran down his face, but his gaze was steady and reassuring. "It's a bad one, isn't it?" he said, shouting again, a small, brave smile on his face. He extended a hand towards Julian, a gesture of comfort and strength. "My name's Liam. We need to get off this bridge. It's not safe out here." Julian finally found his voice, though it was a shaky whisper. "Julian," he managed, his teeth chattering slightly. He looked at Liam's outstretched hand, then back at the raging storm. The idea of moving felt impossible, but Liam's calm presence, even in the middle of this chaos, was a powerful comfort. Liam didn't wait. He stepped closer, his movements careful on the slippery wood. He gently took Julian's arm, his grip firm and warm, a stark contrast to the cold, wet world around them. "Come on, Julian," Liam said, his voice closer now, still loud but less of a shout. "We'll go slow. Just follow me. We'll get through this together." The simple words, "together," filled Julian with a surge of relief. He wasn't alone anymore. Liam's hand on his arm, his steady gaze, and his determined voice were like anchors in the wild storm. Julian nodded again, feeling a tiny bit of his fear begin to recede, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. He trusted Liam, even though they were strangers. In this moment, on this storm-battered bridge, Liam was his rescuer. Liam kept a firm, gentle hand on Julian's arm. "All right, Julian, let's take it slow," he yelled over the wind, leaning in so Julian could hear him. "Watch your step. The planks are really slick." Julian nodded, still trembling a little, but Liam's steady presence was a strong comfort. He felt a bit like a small boat that had found a bigger, stronger ship to guide it through rough seas. Together, they started to move. Each step was a careful, deliberate act. The wooden planks of the bridge were indeed treacherous, made glassy by the relentless rain. The wind pushed and pulled at them, trying to throw them off balance. Liam walked slightly in front, but kept his body turned partly towards Julian, almost shielding him from the worst of the wind. He held Julian's arm tightly, providing a steady anchor. Julian, in turn, found himself gripping Liam's jacket sleeve with his free hand, needing that extra contact to feel secure. Their soaked clothes brushed against each other, cold and heavy, but the warmth of Liam's hand on his arm was a small, reassuring beacon. The thunder continued to boom, sometimes close enough to make the bridge vibrate beneath their feet, sometimes a little farther away. Each flash of lightning still made Julian jump, but now, with Liam by his side, the terror was lessened. He wasn't alone to face the overwhelming power of the storm. He focused on Liam's back, on the steady rhythm of his steps, trying to match it. "Almost there," Liam shouted, pointing vaguely ahead, though the end of the bridge was still mostly hidden by the thick curtain of rain. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to the wild chaos surrounding them. He didn't seem scared, or at least he didn't show it. His courage was infectious, slowly seeping into Julian. As they moved, Julian noticed how Liam would sometimes put his foot down carefully, testing the plank before putting his full weight on it. He was thinking for both of them, making sure they were as safe as possible. This thoughtfulness made Julian feel even more grateful. He felt a strange sense of unity with this stranger, bound together by the storm and their shared struggle to get to safety. The wind suddenly intensified, nearly ripping Julian's hood off. He stumbled, but Liam's grip tightened, pulling him upright. "Gotcha!" Liam yelled, a quick, reassuring squeeze on his arm. Julian looked up at Liam, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. Liam gave him a quick, encouraging smile, a flash of white in the gray storm. It wasn't a big smile, but it was enough to tell Julian, "We've got this." Inch by careful inch, step by careful step, they made their way across the long, slippery bridge. The roar of the rain and wind, the booming thunder, and the flashes of lightning were still terrifying, but they were no longer overwhelming. Julian had a helper, a guide, and that made all the difference. He was still scared, but now a tiny thread of hope was weaving itself into his fear, thanks to Liam. They continued their slow, careful journey, each step a small victory against the storm. The biting wind felt less sharp with Liam nearby, and the roar of the rain, while still loud, didn't seem to swallow Julian whole anymore. He focused on the feeling of Liam's hand on his arm, a steady warmth in the cold. Then, just as a particularly strong gust of wind threatened to push them off balance, Liam instinctively pulled Julian closer. At that very instant, a spectacular flash of lightning ripped across the sky, brighter and closer than any before it. It lit up the entire world in a dazzling, stark white, making the rain look like millions of shimmering needles falling from the sky. For a split second, Julian and Liam were caught in the intense glow, their faces inches apart. Julian saw Liam's eyes, wide with surprise and a hint of exhilaration, framed by dark, wet hair plastered to his forehead. Rain streamed down Liam's face, making him look like he'd just surfaced from the river, yet there was a brave, almost excited sparkle in his gaze. Liam, in turn, saw Julian's face, pale and wet, but with his fear now mixed with a wide-eyed wonder at the raw power of the storm. Their clothes were completely soaked, dripping heavily, and their hair hung heavy with water. For a moment, they just stared at each other, illuminated by the lightning, their breaths caught in their throats. The sheer power of the moment, the closeness, and the shared brush with the storm's ferocity broke something inside Julian. A sudden, shaky giggle escaped him, a sound he hadn't expected, a strange mix of fear and wild excitement. Liam's eyes crinkled at the corners, and a small, trembling laugh bubbled up from him too. It wasn't a hearty laugh, but a nervous, almost surprised sound, full of the adrenaline that had been pumping through their veins. Their laughter was quickly snatched by the wind, barely audible over the thunder that immediately followed the lightning flash. But it was there, a shared moment of bewildered joy in the heart of the storm. In that brief, shaky laughter, the last bits of Julian's paralyzing fear began to melt away. It was replaced by something unexpected, a strange kind of fascination. The storm was still powerful, still dangerous, but sharing it with Liam, seeing the same wide-eyed awe reflected in his face, made it feel less like a threat and more like a wild, untamed show. They were two small figures against nature's grandeur, and in their shared vulnerability, a quiet understanding bloomed between them. The thunder still boomed, but it no longer held the same terror. It was just noise now, a loud backdrop to their unexpected connection. With renewed determination, Julian and Liam pressed on. The shared, shaky laughter had somehow cleared the air between them, despite the actual storm still raging. They felt a little lighter, a little braver. Liam continued to lead, his grip on Julian's arm a constant reassurance. Julian, in turn, kept his eyes fixed on Liam, finding strength in his steady form. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few more minutes, the end of the bridge began to appear through the watery haze. It was a blurry outline at first, then clearer, revealing the muddy path that led off into the woods. A wave of immense relief washed over Julian. He could almost feel the solid ground beneath his feet already. As their feet touched the muddy bank, stepping off the last wooden plank, a noticeable change swept through the weather. It was as if the storm had decided to follow them only so far. The furious hammering of the rain against their faces suddenly eased. The heavy downpour softened into a gentle drizzle, then a fine mist, like the world was taking a deep, calming breath. The wind, which had been howling like a banshee, began to die down. It still rustled the leaves in the trees, making them dance, but it no longer pushed and tugged at their clothes with such violence. The air, still cool and damp, felt lighter, less suffocating. And the thunder. Oh, the thunder! It began to roll away, no longer exploding right above their heads. The booming crashes grew softer, farther apart, like a giant moving away, his angry shouts fading into distant grumbles. The flashes of lightning, too, became less frequent, less blinding, just soft flickers at the edge of the dark clouds. Julian and Liam stopped, just off the bridge, their bodies still shivering from the cold and the lingering adrenaline. They looked at each other, their faces still dripping wet, but now they could actually hear themselves think. The sudden quiet after the deafening roar was almost startling. It was a soft, gentle stillness that replaced the chaos, making the world feel brand new and peaceful. The only sounds now were the gentle drip of water from the leaves and the soft sigh of the wind. Julian took a deep, shaky breath, filling his lungs with the fresh, clean air. He looked at Liam, a genuine smile finally breaking through his chattering lips. "We made it," he whispered, his voice hoarse from yelling and from the cold. He couldn't believe they were safe. He couldn't believe the storm was passing. And he couldn't believe this kind stranger had stayed with him. Julian stood there, dripping wet and shivering, but a wave of warmth spread through him as he looked at Liam. The relief of being off the bridge and out of the worst of the storm was immense, but was Liam's presence that truly made him feel safe. He still clutched Liam's arm, his fingers tight on the soaked fabric of the older boy's jacket. "Thank you," Julian finally managed to say, his voice still a little shaky, but full of sincere gratitude. He looked up at Liam, his eyes, though red from the wind and rain, shining with a heartfelt appreciation. "Thank you for helping me. I was so scared." Liam offered a tired but kind smile. "Anyone would be Julian," he said, his own voice a bit raspy from shouting over the storm. He squeezed Julian's arm gently. "That was quite a storm, wasn't it? Glad we made it through." He didn't let go of Julian's arm right away, a silent acknowledgement of the comfort their shared touch had brought. As the last distant grumbles of thunder faded and the gentle patter of rain on leaves became the main sound, a quiet stillness settled between them. The adrenaline that had pumped through Julian's veins was slowly leaving him, replaced by a strange mix of calm and a tingling feeling of connection. He looked at Liam, really looked at him, and saw not just a helper, but someone who had shared a truly wild and scary moment with him. Liam was looking at Julian too, his expression thoughtful. He saw the genuine gratitude in Julian's eyes, and also a flicker of something new, something that went beyond simple thanks. Liam felt it too, a sudden, unexpected bond. Going through something so intense, so frightening, side by side with another person, created a special link. It was as if the storm, in all its chaos, had stripped away the usual ways people meet, leaving only their true selves to connect. They were strangers, yet they had leaned on each other, literally, through a terrifying experience. Julian realized that Liam hadn't just helped him get off the bridge. He had helped him face his fear, turning a moment of pure terror into something almost memorable, even fascinating. The raw power of nature they had witnessed, the close call, and the shared shaky laughter had woven them together in a way that hours of normal conversation never could. Julian felt a spark, not of fright, but of something warm and hopeful, blooming in his chest. It was a feeling of friendship, of shared understanding, born right there in the muddy quiet after the storm. Liam nodded slowly, a small smile playing on his lips. He understood. They both knew, without needing to say a word, that this wasn't just a chance meeting. This was something more. With the silence of the forest slowly replacing the roar of the storm, Julian and Liam stood, still close, letting the quiet sink in. The gentle drip of water from the leaves and the distant, soft rumble of thunder were the only sounds. Julian finally let go of Liam's jacket, though he felt a little strange doing so. "That was incredible," Julian said, looking up at the sky where the dark clouds were starting to break apart, revealing patches of lighter gray. He still felt a lingering tremble in his legs, but his voice held a hint of awe. "Like nothing I've ever seen." Liam nodded, shaking his head slightly, as if to clear the last drops of rain. "Yeah, it was a real show, wasn't it?" He looked towards the bridge, now a dark, wet line stretching across the river. Those lightning flashes were something else, especially that last one. Julian's cheeks flushed slightly at the memory of their faces so close, caught in the blinding light. "I thought," I thought the bridge was going to fly away, he confessed, a small, embarrassed laugh escaping him. I was really, really scared. Liam smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time. Me too, a little bit, he admitted, his eyes sparkling. When that first thunderclap hit, I thought the world was ending. But it was also kind of amazing, don't you think? Like being part of something huge. Yeah, Julian agreed, his eyes wide with a newfound wonder. When the lightning lit everything up and the rain was falling so hard, it felt like we were the only two people in the whole world. And we were brave, even when we were scared. Liam chuckled softly. We certainly were. I mean, who else would be out on that bridge in the middle of a monster storm? He looked at Julian, a respectful glint in his eyes. You held up well, Julian, for being so young and caught off guard. Julian felt a surge of pride. You helped me be brave, Liam, he said honestly. When you came, I felt so much better. I think I would have just stayed there, frozen. They stood for a few more moments, just talking about the storm. They talked about the strength of the wind, the sheer volume of the rain, and the breathtaking power of the lightning. They shared their amazement, their lingering awe, and the strange satisfaction of having faced something so big and come out on the other side. The fear had truly dissolved, leaving behind a profound respect for nature's might and a quiet pride in their own resilience. The shared memory was already shaping into a powerful story, one they had lived through together. It felt less like a scary ordeal and more like an epic adventure they had been chosen to experience. The last distant rumble of thunder echoed, a soft farewell from the departing storm. Julian and Liam stood in the gentle drizzle, their clothes still soaked, but their spirits much lighter. The fear was gone, replaced by a feeling of quiet wonder and a surprising sense of closeness. The forest around them, wet and glistening, felt calm again. Liam finally broke the comfortable silence. Well, I guess we should probably get home and get out of these wet clothes before we catch a cold. He gave a shiver, a playful grin on his face. Julian nodded, pulling his thin, wet jacket tighter around himself. Yeah, Grandma's going to wonder what happened to me. He hesitated, suddenly feeling a pang of sadness at the thought of them parting ways. This stranger had just saved him from a truly terrifying experience, and in doing so, had become more than just a stranger. Hey, Liam, Julian started, looking up at him. Thank you, really, for everything. He paused, then took a leap. Do you think maybe we could see each other again sometime? Not during a thunderstorm, though. He chuckled, a genuine, warm sound. Liam's smile widened. I'd like that, Julian, he said, his voice warm. Definitely not during another storm, unless we're watching it from a very, very dry place. He laughed, and the sound was easy and friendly. We survived an epic adventure. We should probably celebrate that with dry clothes and maybe some hot chocolate. Julian's face lit up. Hot chocolate sound great. He felt a bubbling excitement, not just for the warm drink, but for the promise of seeing Liam again. He reached into his wet pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and a pen that, miraculously, still worked. What's your number? I'll text you. Liam gave him his phone number, and Julian carefully wrote it down, his fingers stiff from a cold. As he put the paper back in his pocket, a sense of joy bubbled up inside him. This scary, wild afternoon had turned into something truly special. He had faced his fears, witnessed nature's power, and found a new friend all at once. It was great meeting you, Julian, Liam said, giving him a friendly pat on the shoulder. Stay safe, and I'll hear from you soon. You too, Liam. Julian called back as Liam began to walk down the muddy path toward his own way home. He watched Liam go, a feeling of deep contentment settling in his heart. The bridge, which had been a place of terror, now felt like the starting point of a new, unexpected friendship. The storm had passed, but had left something precious behind. Julian knew this was the beginning of something good. He grinned, already imagining the stories he'd tell his grandmother and the plans he'd make with his new friend.